you spot any risks that had not been sufficiently reduced? Did you notice that participants checked to ensure that clothing and footwear were appropriate for the activity? Light-coloured clothing or fluorescent clothing help other road users to see riders in the daylight and poor light. All participants wore safety helmets and checked front and rear lights. Also, the bikes were all checked over to ensure they were fit for purpose. Participants checked tyre pressure, lights, bells and saddle heights. Additional actions that would have been picked up by a simple risk assessment. Did you notice that participants were not made aware of where they would be cycling and for how long, whether or not they should expect traffic, and no one checked that they were all aware of how to use the road safely? All participants should have been made aware of potential traffic and routes chosen which minimise exposure to traffic. Participants should have been made aware of where they are cycling and for how long. This is important as it will help them plan ahead and ensure appropriate precautions are made, such as wet weather gear, first aid kits or food and drink. Did you spot that some of the bikes were not suitable for the type of cycling being undertaken? It's not appropriate to use road bikes for a mountain biking activity. If this was a mountain biking activity, additional controls might also include any hazards such as steep drops are marked or blocked off. Vehicle access to the area is blocked. Whilst these two case studies looked at different activities, the process of conducting a risk assessment was the same. The environment the activity takes place in, the equipment that needs to be used is fit for purpose, the clothing being worn is appropriate, any training or rules required for the activity. A risk assessment is mostly common sense. It involves identifying things that pose a risk of harm and implementing steps to reduce the likelihood or level of those risks. The risk assessment should be recorded. However, paperwork alone never saved anyone. Action is what protects people. And so a simple set of bullet points, which are acted upon, are key. It is important to know that certain activities have specific rules which must be followed. These can be found in POR Chapter 9. Risk assessment forms may look like this. Risk assessments can also look like this. In fact, the format for recording it is up to you. The important bit is to ensure that you have made notes, identified key actions, and most importantly, ensure that these are followed up. If you're not sure who has done a risk assessment for an activity, make sure you find out. Don't assume someone else has done it. It's also worth noting that risk assessments should be done for everything we do in scouting, not just activities that seem more adventurous. A risk assessment for a game played in your meeting place is as important as one when you take your section canoeing. You'll need to continue to assess any risks as an activity takes place, in case there are any new conditions or circumstances introduced. You may not need to start from scratch with a risk assessment for every activity you are planning when they are repeat activities, and for weekly meetings you may well have existing risk assessments that simply need revisiting. However, just reading what was written last time without considering whether it needs any amendments is not enough. As has been said before, paperwork alone never saved anyone. Action is what protects people. Occasionally, despite taking all of the necessary precautions, accidents happen.
In this section, we looked at the Scout safety policy and how it works in practice through the use of risk assessments.
Risk assessments don't have to be thick documents, but a series of bullet points which show how you've thought through an activity, identified the potential risks, and what you plan to do to minimise them. Key things to remember are:
safety is everyone's responsibility. Paperwork alone never saved anyone. Action is what protects people. If an accident does happen, then you will need to deal with the incident in the first instance, activate the emergency procedures, and in most cases, contact the information centre for an incident report form. In more serious cases, where there is the possibility of loss of life or serious injury, then contact the duty press officer. Don't forget the emergency prompt card, which is there to provide you with the information you need in case of an emergency.